For how many people am I your only Martian? Has anybody been to Mars before? So a few of you have been great. So thank you very much. Bonjour à tous. Je suis très heureux d'être ici aujourd'hui. That's about all I can say in French, and I practice that because I'm a student of the public school system in Ontario. But I will try. And is that okay, Julie? Yeah. Thank you very much. So I am very pleased to be joining you. I'm actually an Ottawa girl. I went to Carleton, I went to Algonquin, and I went to Laurentian, which is now a huge Walmart. So I'm a proud graduate of Walmart High. But it's really terrific to be back home, and I've been asked to reflect just a little bit on what we did at Mars in terms of collaboration and innovation, and what, in reflecting 5 or so years out, was important in creating this convergence innovation hub. And I'm not controlling the slides, so can you, I'll just do this maybe. So Mars itself is a nonprofit organization. It's dedicated to maximizing both the economic and social impact of Canadian innovation. And that's really important. And I think when folks started it, they probably thought about social innovation as jobs. Well, I'm going to push the boundaries of that and hopefully get you to see how social innovation absolutely belongs in a traditional innovation center. So one of the lessons that's incredibly important is that visuals are critical. I think all our artists know that. These 3 banners, which say Convergence Innovation, are front and center when you walk into Mars. It's what you see, and it's the very first thing that hits you. Although I have to say, a lot of people actually just walk right by them, and for them, Convergence Innovation means nothing. And so I want to rip that apart a little bit. I think it reminds us that innovation can happen anywhere, but it accelerates on the margins, and we have to create opportunities for the margins to exist. We also have to think differently about pulling together unusual stakeholders. I love the discussion, Bob, about trying to explain what you do to your kids. Try to say you run a social innovation program, really long cocktail party discussion. But I think it's really important for us to try to figure out who are the unusual stakeholders that we can bring together and that are not going to understand us. So you take an elevator ride at Mars and you're with a scientist or with an entrepreneur, with a researcher, with a venture capitalist. We don't actually speak the same language. And I really think one of the lessons that's important for us is how do we create an opportunity? How do we create knowledge brokers who are able to speak the language of these different disciplines? And how do then we begin to facilitate opportunities where they can actually value each other? History is important. So Mars began when the University Health Network was merging a bunch of different hospitals. And, John Evans, the guy in the middle, is a really great innovator in this country. He was the former president of the University of Toronto, but more importantly in my mind is he started the McMaster Medical School. He was really young. And McMaster is the only medical school that you don't have to have a science degree, an undergraduate degree in science to go to. So he valued people from different disciplines can come in and teach medicine a few things. UHN said, okay, we have this surplus space, which is the old Toronto General Hospital, and let's sell it for condos, because it's on the subway line, it's a really great spot. And John said, I think we can do better than that. We have about 10 city blocks where there's billions and billions of dollars invested in research, but we don't commercialize very well as Canadians. We're terrific at the ideas, we're terrific at the research, but getting it into action is a bit of a challenge. And what I would say, getting it into improved health outcomes for Canadians is also a challenge for us. So he came up with this concept of convergence innovation, pulling together what is now a social enterprise, researchers, venture capitalists, creative communities, entrepreneurs. And these guys over there are the folks who discovered insulin, right? So Banting Invest, right across the street. And the first clinical trials for insulin were in what is now the Mars Center. That's something that you don't want to turn into condos. But it takes boldness, it takes vision to be able to pull that off. Know your history. History is important. The other thing that John did was he said, I want this to happen so badly that I'm going to put $1 million of my own money into it. And then he went out and got 12 other people to do the same thing. This is the Joe Rotmans of the world. And they all went to the government together and said, we're actually putting our money where our mouth is. And so it was only because they did that they made this personal investment that they got the government excited about it. So it was a public-private partnership. That was the history of the program, and it's really important to hold on to that. So location is important. Mars is in what's called the Discovery District, and we have issues of density. So we have about 10 hospitals and 10 city blocks, but we're also part of our Gallery of Ontario is around the corner. TIFF, which you probably saw in the news recently, is right around the corner. It's really important to think about where you locate any of these programs. How do you take advantage of what's around you? Because location is important. Canada is a really big country with a really small population, and we've got to work together to try to figure out how we can succeed. It's actually breaking my heart watching what's happening to RIM. I'm hoping that we can figure all of this out because I desperately want them to succeed. I think I'm holding on to my BlackBerry like crazy. So where does Ottawa have this density? Where can you be adjacent to communities but not necessarily owned by them? So if you have been to Mars, you'll notice that Queen's Park is right across the street. University of Toronto is across the street, and Bay Street is a few blocks away. It is adjacent to government, academia, and the private sector, but it is firmly rooted in community. And I think that's a critical point. Thank you. So moving to phase 2, physical space, critical. Although we do a lot virtually, people need a physical manifestation of what you're talking about in terms of convergence and collaboration. And again, our artists will recognize that we want it to be as beautiful as it can be. This is a beautiful space. Not this particular room, but the building itself. And I know that you're looking at renovating that, and that's incredibly exciting. Beauty is important. So we have our past, we have the present, and we've just declared that we're going to be opening another 750,000 square feet. So at 1.5 million square feet of innovation, it'll be one of the largest innovation hubs in the world. Be grounded in the past, be positioned for the future. Physical space is important. It's also important to walk the talk. We created something called Mars Innovation, which is, we brought together all those academic health science centers. And if you just hit the advanced one, we also brought together the Ontario College of Art and Design. And this really changed the dynamic of all these groups. We asked them to come together to collectively pool their intellectual property. So imagine that. So sick kids who invented pablum and is still making money off pablum to this day, is being asked to pool the intellectual capital that they have, their IP, and get the best in the world to help commercialize it. This was a huge undertaking, but we had to make this work because we had to walk the talk that really, really tough collaborations could happen. And this was a really, really tough collaboration. So find partners that recognize they're stronger together to solve the challenges that they know they can't solve alone. Try to find a convergence of the willing, and then you just shame the rest into coming along. Walking the talk is important. Julie already mentioned this, boldness. Boldness is important. Sorry, can you? Thank you. Tim Broadhead, who is this guy, the shorter one, you already know Dr. Evans, is the head of the McConnell Family Foundation. Actually, he just stepped down. It's J.W. McConnell Family Foundation, based in Montreal, our largest family foundation. And they've been providing grants to what they now know as social innovators for a really long time. And so they decided at McConnell that they would approach Mars, who did traditional science and technology kind of innovation, to see if they would adopt social innovation, a bold step. And Ilsa Trinick, who is our CEO, and John Evans, who's our founder, said, sure, well, we think that's kind of cool. And they again went to the province to try to get some funding for this. People thought they were a little crazy, right? Because what they're doing already around commercialization of science and technology is hard enough. But they took a very bold step of integrating social innovation into absolutely everything we do. It fundamentally changed the organization that is Mars. And I'm very proud that it happened. I think it was really an opportunity to create a safe place for them to take risks and go to the government and get them to buy into it. Continual learning and adaptation is important. So I was hired to develop SIG, Social Innovation Generation, at Mars. It's completely unique. We haven't found anyone else globally that has integrated social innovation thoroughly across an innovation agenda. So in phase 1, we did 3 things: advisory services, convening, and accelerating the uptake of social innovation. And for phase 2, we are looking at codifying that advisory services and educational programming so it's available to all entrepreneurs. And I'm going to scoot myself slightly by announcing that tomorrow we're going to announce $1.5 million that's been raised for a Center for Impact Investing at Mars. Impact investing is how we fund social purpose work differently. We think about grants and donations, but this is a different way to use money to support social purpose work. And I'm going to be sticking around, so if we don't have a lot of time for questions, please come and ask me about the center because I'm very excited about it. And finally, we're looking to set up an innovative solutions lab. How do we create a safe place for people to come together and tackle really wicked challenges? Entrepreneurs are a critical component of that, but they're not everything. So how do we move into this next phase of solution seeking? I want to give you a couple of examples because it's important to make it real. So at Mars, you can come in any door. You can come in the life sciences door, the clean tech door, the information technology, communications, entertainment door, or the social innovation door. So let's start with Pointerware. This is a scene from Dragon's Den. You guys know that show? So these are two young guys who are computer scientists, and their grandmother is like not happy because there's all this email, internet stuff going on, and she feels sort of left out of it. So could they help her? So they develop touchscreen technology. She turns it on, 2 big buttons. One says email, one says internet. She hits the email button, up comes pictures of her family. So she touches Julie's picture, and if she can type, she'll send a message, and if she can't, she can talk, and it'll be sent to her as an MP3 file or whatever they choose. So the folks at Mars are very excited about the technology, and I'm very excited about reducing social isolation. And I'm very excited about what that technology can do for people that have all different levels of ability. And so together we work with them, and their first big client is a nursing home, and the nursing home buys it because it's a way for families to keep connected with their elderly relatives. So that's an example of how we make it real. Bit Strips is another program that is about making cartoons of yourself. And again, they thought about corporate audiences and other kinds of things. And we said, what about males? What about boys? Wouldn't they love this? And is there an opportunity to sell this to a school? Their largest client is the Toronto District School Board, and boys' literacy rates are significantly improving by using something like Bit Strips. TIES is a really interesting program that links the formal and informal systems of healthcare. So if you look at who's doing caregiving, it's mostly families. If you look where the dollars go for caregiving, it's mostly the formal healthcare system. So how do we link those systems in a way that begins to address what is happening on the margins, so that if my mom is here in Ottawa, I'm in Toronto, my brother's in Vancouver, we can actually set up a personal network with my mom at the center, but the woman across the street can be invited in so she can say, you know, I haven't seen your mom out walking in a few days. And the doctor can actually indicate things online where we give them permission and there's special access codes. And it's a way of linking formal and informal systems of care. Again, thinking about the margins. And finally, SQUAG. It's an aunt of a young boy who's got autism, and SQUAG is the term that he uses all the time, and she's been able to set up peer networks for him online that has absolutely fundamentally changed how he's able to interact. Not so much one-on-one, terrific online. So lots of opportunities to make it real for people. It doesn't matter how they get in, what matters is what they get out of it. I think it's incredibly important to tell our own story, so I love the examples that Bob gave. And I also am not surprised that we didn't know a lot of the stuff, especially the Canadian stuff. So I studied women's studies at Carleton, among a couple of other things, and I didn't know that the Women's Institute started in Stoney Creek, Ontario. I found out about that by reading a UK report on the top 100 social innovations of all time. I didn't know that. We really need to do a better job of telling our own story, and that's why we need to engage all the sectors to do that, to help us dissect what that story is, what is the essence of it, what is the essence that is uniquely Canadian, and I think it's about being collaboration. I think Canadians are uniquely positioned to do this really well, but we need help telling our own story. I think it's important for people to have a place to convene. We've created a leadership series, and we try to bring in thought leaders. We try to bring in the best minds that we can find to have people think differently. Some of these folks are pretty famous. It's the woman who started Kiva, Paul Martin, who led the Social Finance Task Force, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Michael J. Fox. But really, for me, the most interesting people are in the middle, and these are our homegrown social entrepreneurs who are talking to each other about their stories and telling that out. The thing is, they don't necessarily have access to these kind of folks. So if you are in a position to bring in the best, please do it. Please try to think about a way that you can create a way in for others. It's important to give people a place to convene. So someone said to me, for the government folks in the audience, you should apologize right up front. But I don't actually think what I'm saying is that horrible. I actually think it's incredibly liberating, which is important to work with government, but not be of government. It's hard to take risks in government. You have a lot of restrictions. So what you need to do is work with others where you can create this kind of neutral sandbox. This is a social innovation summit that we did with 3 ministers, Children and Youth Services, Research and Innovation, and Citizenship and Immigration. So first of all, getting them to work together was a bit of a challenge. Getting them offices to work together, more so. The bureaucracy, more so. The communications department, insane. Right? It's really hard to get communications people to work together. But we did it. We pulled off a social innovation summit. It was a lot of fun, but the stuff that they did couldn't have happened inside government. First of all, the timeline wouldn't have allowed it, but also the risks that we took. And if I get you to go to the next slide, we created a social innovation wiki, open sourcing government, creating an opportunity for people to get in on a policy-making process. I actually spoke to a federal department who said, this is terrific and it scares us to death. Like, how did you do this? And so we talked about creating this sort of safe buffer. And if it works, sharing the success, right? So you have to be in a position to think about who are you going to give credit to in a way that the people who are in positions of power know that you are the one that did what had to be done, but giving someone else the credit is absolutely the way to go. Creating a distance. Now, interestingly, because we're in the election period right now, they made us take down the wiki, because it's deemed community engagement, and you can't do community engagement in a blackout period, but we'll get it back up. It's important to get out of your comfort zone, and I love this forum. I'm so happy that Julie invited me. One of the events that we do is something called Net Change Week, a whole week of social technology for social change, where we absolutely engage artists at the core of this program. The photo in the middle has a QR code on it, and so artists who are using technology so you can get the story behind the photo. This is the 100th anniversary of the birth of Marshall McLuhan. We made sure there was a huge, huge exhibit that was all about that. And research, the thing at the bottom, is about open data. How do we look at all of this in an open data space? So force those unusual collaborations, get out of your comfort zone, talk to people who don't understand you. This is one example, and you've got tons of them here, but this is one of my favorite ones, is we worked with the Canadian Film Centre to set up a huge screen. So if you've been at Mars, there's a big escalator that goes down, Grand Escalier Roulant, and you go down and there's this huge screen. And so you see people actually having fun using their mobile phones to plant a virtual tree. As the week went on, as the conference went on, people could change the size of the tree, they could plant more trees, they could change the colors of the trees, and they had fun and they played. So it was great progress to watch the conference bloom and watch these trees bloom, but what was really exciting is we worked not only with the digital artists and with everybody at Mars and the technology side of things, we worked with Evergreen, which is an organization that tries to reforest or forest for the first time urban environments. And for every virtual tree that was planted, they committed to plant 2 actual trees. As Julie mentioned again, critical to see what's happening globally. There's lots going on. Hubs are everywhere. Center for Social Innovation in Toronto, if you've been there, is amazing. There's a whole hub network, San Francisco, UK. It is really terrific. People are getting the shared spaces model and the value of the shared spaces model. Mind Lab is from Denmark, and it's all about public sector innovation, bringing in different sectors to think about how we do and how we issue public services differently. The guy's name is Christian Basson. He's if you're interested in this space, I encourage you to actually we have him filmed. He was at Mars, lots of stuff there, or just read his work. In South Africa, there's a program called RIOS, Change Lab, where they tackle some of the most wicked problems like peace and reconciliation, you can imagine, by taking people through a whole theory U process. Change labs are very exciting and will be the basis of some of our work in social innovation. And finally, I just want to talk about this guy. His name is Sir Ronald Cohen, founder of venture capital in the UK. And 10 years ago, they launched a social finance task force that came up with a very few recommendations about how to position them as leaders in the social finance space. Well, we just launched ours last year. The first anniversary is in December. That's the committee that Paul Martin was on. And we're really trying to make it accessible for people to understand how we fund collaborations, how we fund convening, how we fund social purpose work differently. And again, as I said, a complete passion, so I encourage you to please talk to me about that. And just also let you know that we are thrilled to work with and find out what's going on globally, but we're competitive enough to want to do better than them. So we want to figure it out and we want to leapfrog over them. So about 30 years ago, when I was in Ottawa, a guy called Michael Warren headed the post office. It was the first time it became a Crown Corporation. And he was from Toronto, and he was suitably smug, not like me. He was from Toronto, and he said in an interview, when he was asked, what's the best thing about Ottawa? He said, well, the best thing about Ottawa is you can get anywhere in 15 minutes. And then they said, well, what's the worst thing? He goes, well, there's nothing to do when you get there. so Mr. Michael Warren, I have two comments for you 30 years later. First of all, you cannot get anywhere in 15 minutes in Ottawa anymore, as I can attest to this morning and listening to all the lovely traffic jams. And number two, you will be overwhelmed when you get there because the opportunities are incredible. It's exactly what has been stated. You have world-leading academic healthcare institutions. And when my mom was sick recently, I was thrilled about the level of healthcare costs. Of healthcare that was available to her. The costs are another issue. There are strong community programs. There is diversity that comes from your embassies. You absolutely have everything you need to make this work. You have the ingredients to make magic. What you need to do is the hard work of mixing it up and spitting it out. I want to thank you very much. Merci pour de la conférence.